So, for the first question for this afternoon, I'd like to just, throw it out to Brian. Brian, being the entrepreneurial arm of NUS, which is a university in Singapore, how have the students benefited from NUS Enterprise, and how has it positioned them for the future?
TJ, thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Julia as well. And thank you for having the rest of the panel here this afternoon. Let me start off by telling you a little bit about NUS Enterprise, which is quite a unique setup for a university. Before I get into some of the programs that our students are enjoying. What is unique about this, and maybe I should start off, as a university, our main core approach to helping innovation and entrepreneurship is still in the education space. So as an academic unit, or sometimes termed as an institute of higher learning, that will be our primary purpose. And therefore, what can we do to help them? NUS Enterprise, as TJ has mentioned earlier, is the entrepreneurial arm of the university. So anything to do with innovation and entrepreneurship, that's where we form. And there are three things that we look into. First of all, we support the whole education part of innovation and entrepreneurship. I'll get into a bit of the program a little later as I explain some of them. Secondly, we look into venture creation. Here we support two levels of venture creation. First of all, in the innovation space, as a university, we produce through our intensive research and development support and many of the research centers that we are involved in, inventions and IP is formed. So the first thing that the unit does, which is to protect intellectual property, often called the Tech Transfer Office, will then make sure that we patent the inventions, and then how do we commercialize it? So commercialization then takes place in two ways. One is it can be pushed out to corporates to be taken off as a license agreement, or what we have been pushing greatly in the last 2 years is to spin off companies, meaning to have startups taking up the technologies. And usually we encourage the postdocs and the research assistants to take their technology out, and we put all the policies and programs in place. We do have a program called the GRIP, which is a Graduate Research Innovation Program, of which we launched about 2 years ago. So in this short span of 2 years, we have produced more than 80 companies in this area itself. And then the last area, as we begin to build startup companies, we need to support them. And therefore, we do have a global platform that supports this whole I&E space through a gateway called Block 71. So Block 71 is a platform in which we have outpost setups, particularly in China, in the US, and then 3 in Indonesia. Last year, we launched Vietnam and Japan itself. And we'll continue to build this up so that our startups can move into all these locations easily as they expand out. After all, Singapore has such a small market, as you know. Now, coming back to the question that TJ has asked me, how would the NUS students actually benefit from the programs that we have? One of the flagship programs that we have is the NUS Overseas Colleges. Now, this was launched many years ago, almost 20 years right now. And we have seen close to almost 3,000 students, alumni coming into this program. What is NUS Overseas Colleges? It's a program whereby, first of all, we start out by ensuring that we select the right students. And so we have a very rigorous way of selection. Students are asked, and we go through several interviews before they are selected into the program. So to just give you an idea, for every 5 applicants, only 1 gets into the program itself. What is this program all about? They spend 1 year in the technological hubs around the world, and we have 10 in the world: Silicon Valley, Israel, New York, Canada, China, and so on and so forth. so forth. So all these technological hubs, they spend a year sitting in a startup company alongside with the CEO, the CTO or CMO, learning about a startup. And many of them come back very different in that sense, because they learn to see what a startup environment is all about. In fact, one of the things that we found, having run this program for a few years, that there's a higher propensity for these students to have a startup of their own. We have actually seen more than 600 startups coming out of this program for the students who are of the alumni in this program itself. And some of them have gone on to become unicorns as well for Singapore. So that's one of the programs that we have in place. Some of the other programs are like the summer program that we run for, where we work with our ASEAN countries and the universities, and we encourage students to come into this program. They spend about 3 weeks here. Of course, COVID has limited this, and we've only been able to do this virtually. But in a short 3 weeks, they actually see and develop a business program. And then what's important is interacting with other entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs within the location itself. And then finally, we launched a program last year, the Masters of Venture Creation. And this is really to push the entrepreneur who wants to explore and understand what it takes to build a company through this Master of Venture Creation. So that gives you a bit of a broad overview of what NUS Enterprise does. There are many more things that we do, and I'll probably find the opportunity to fill you in this whole panel itself. But TJ, thank you very much, and I'll hand the session back to you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Brian. From your perspective, what more do you think can be done, perhaps in Singapore and Southeast Asia? So, Brian, if you could share, please.
Yeah, TJ, thank you so much, and both Cheryl, Jane, and Xiao Hui, actually, many of the things that you said have been very much relevant here. I started off talking very much about a very focused area in the university itself. And I know TJ, as you had mentioned, how would an IHL look at it? Actually, I would like to respond to this question in a slightly different manner, because while we do look at what we have over here, just like in Singapore, we would be irrelevant if we are not connected to the rest of the world, or particularly ASEAN. So let me address this whole question, and I hope to leave the participants with some handles and some practical points that you may be able to take away to think about, because these are some of the things that we are also experiencing and what we're trying to do here at the university itself. Let me start by saying that incubators and accelerators, as we have seen them popping up in the last 10 to 15 years, is still an important part. But I'm sure everyone would agree, our incubators have to go beyond the four walls itself. So it's not anymore just having a space that you sit inside, or an acceleration program that you run, a 30-day, 100-day program or whatever, because these are very established approaches. So beyond that, what are some of the things that we want to look into? And I want to give and leave with 3 areas that I feel we might want to look at this, and how the university is looking into this whole area itself. The first area is ecosystem development. As in my title, and I'm very passionate about this. Jane talked about this quite a number of times. She mentioned this, and I know Cheryl also talked about this. But basically, we can't live in a bubble of our own anymore. So there's a lot of connections. And I'm glad to see that from Xiao Hui, how he's using the SME market with the university and the IP and linking that up. It's not easy, I know, because our university is also doing that. But that's really building up the whole ecosystem. And what's in the ecosystem? Beyond the incubators and accelerators, we need to link up with more startups, more industry people, with the corporates themselves, with agencies, with investors, and the list goes on. So really it is, as we move into beyond the incubator and accelerator, it has to be a whole ecosystem because they work with one another in itself. So that's one area that we want to look into. The second area is really an area that I think NUS as itself is focusing quite a lot on also. It is changing the mindset. I think one of the things that we can see in this day and age, or if I can say in this modern world, the whole approach of how we see and think about challenges is so different today. Okay, our challenges are not straightforward. So one of the things that the university has done is we use this term, future ready graduate. And one of the things that is being done here is our education process is also going through a transformation. What we're doing is we're enabling students to not just have one focus discipline, but multidisciplinary approach to their education itself. Now, why is this important? Because if you look at many of the problems that entrepreneurs are resolving or trying to find solutions to, what we have as my NUS president would define it, today's world, we are dealing with what we call wicked problems. What is wicked problem? A wicked problem, as we can tell, COVID is one of them, right? First of all, it is very undefined, right? How do you define it? You can't. Many of the problems that we face today are very undefined. Secondly, they are constantly changing. So, we're trying to solve something that it's like trying to change the tire of a car when it's moving. So that's what we are facing with today. And then finally, it challenges the norm of what we know. So we can't use what we know today to solve some of these problems. So really, we're dealing again with this wicked problem, and therefore it requires a whole mindset change of how we are looking and dealing with this. And the incubators and accelerators, or rather the whole ecosystem, needs to take this as a whole, and then, how do we then leverage upon this whole concept itself? That's my second point. The last point here is really coming back to something that Cheryl mentioned earlier. How do we connect? And maybe the word she used was collaborate. NUS is also very big in looking at the ASEAN space itself. We need to collaborate with our neighbors. How do we actually work with you? How do we learn and understand, what's around here? First and foremost, ASEAN has 675 million population. That's bigger than many of the other continents around. And we are a very fragmented market. Give you one simple example to draw on the dealing with the wicked problem, and then also in the ASEAN space itself. We have a startup that's trying to resolve this whole area of rice. Rice is something that all of us in ASEAN eat, Every country that in ASEAN takes rice. Do you think the Western world will solve the problem of rice? Rice is something that only we will understand. And one of the problems that this startup is trying to solve is rice is great for a staple, but it has very high glucosamine index. So how can we reduce this? Then we've of course found a formula in mixing it with rice so that your GI does not jump after eating this compound food itself, or something that's mixed into the compound food itself. So anyway, the company is called Alchemy Food Tech. But what I'm trying to get at is this is really trying to solve a problem that only the ASEAN people will understand. No other continent will understand it because we eat rice almost every day, right? So really this whole thing in summary is how do we then collaborate, understand this whole environment, and then collaborate with one another. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, because here in Singapore, the same thing. Our startups may have the technology, but we do not have the market. So we need to collaborate with people around. And with that, I kind of put that summary to how we see incubators and accelerators and how it would be for Singapore and the ASEAN space itself. TJ,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you so much to our speakers